and welcome to episode 65 of Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. Visit us at letstalkbitcoin.com for our daily guest blog, all our past episodes, and of course, tipping addresses. My name is Adam B. Levine, and this episode is about disruption. In a fiat world, everything is subject to change, and that's exactly what happened in Argentina one recent November night. Andreas, Stephanie, and I talk cryptocurrency and corruption, black markets, and opportunity. Then, CoinPunk is a project founded in part by a grant from the Bitcoin Foundation. Simply put, they allow Bitcoin payments on mobile devices without needing a native application. As we sometimes do, LTB is happy to share the first transaction ever made using this important innovation. Later, Andreas is in Argentina for the Latin American Bitcoin Conference. He caught up with Manuel, the founder and chief developer of proofofexistence.com, the blockchain notary service, to talk about fixing moments in time, how Bitcoin 0.9 will change the game for meta services using it, and more. And finally, we step back from Bitcoin and look for a moment at the larger world we live in. Bitcoin is disruptive financial tech that hasn't yet been stopped because those who wish it ill can't find a head to chop off or a body to drag into court. BSS has been thinking about where all this is heading, and it's an idea worth hearing. We end today's show with Silicon Valley's ultimate exit. So, capital controls? I know somebody mentioned capital controls. Enjoy the show.
Things that we've discussed plenty on this show is the idea that Bitcoin is far, far more important to the other 6 billion. Those who are underbanked, unbanked, living in oppressive regimes, living in countries with hyperinflation, living in countries where burning your money is not as good as, is better than spending it, but not as good as burning goat shit. And in those particular countries, Bitcoin is not just a fad. It's not just a new technology. It's potentially a lifesaver. It's an exit. Nowhere is this more true today than the country of Argentina, where the Latin America Bitcoin Conference is going to begin next weekend. I will be going there, as well as a number of other Bitcoin people. It's going to be a rather important show. And just in time, the Argentinian government decided to throw yet another log on the fire of Bitcoin and on the devaluation and inflationary destruction of the Argentinian currency. If you've been paying attention there, they've suffered from hyperinflation for years, and the government has responded to this by turning the screws on currency controls and trying to keep a panicked population locked in on a sinking ship of currency. The latest news is that they've imposed a foreign currency credit card transaction surcharge. Basically, they apply a tax of 20% already on any transactions where an Argentinian credit card is used to purchase something outside of Argentina, because credit cards were one of the few remaining ways to essentially exit the Argentinian money into US dollars or other currencies. As of this week, they've raised that from 20% to 35%. Again, punishing rates, and really an indication of outright panic by the Argentinian government. They're doing this at a time when there is another option, and that option is Bitcoin. I'm very excited to be visiting Argentina because I think it might be not the first state to adopt Bitcoin, but the first state whose population adopts Bitcoin while the government stays stuck on a currency that nobody wants to use. They're already talking about splitting the currency into a foreign version and a domestic version, similar to what happens in Cuba, where there is one version of the currency for tourists, which is much stronger, and you can get essentially much better returns. And then there's another version of the currency for internal use, which is much, much weaker. And so they're proposing doing that with their Argentinian money. But before they actually have a chance to do that, a big chunk of the population is already using Bitcoin for exactly that purpose. And that adoption may accelerate. And keep in mind, Argentina has electricity, they have internet, they have a literate and technologically savvy population. They have all of the prerequisites and preconditions to hit that tipping point and do a mass evacuation of currency. The only thing that's stopping them is these broken currency controls that simply can't stand in the way of Bitcoin. So is Argentina going to be the next tipping point?
It seems obvious that it is. And you're right, Andreas, this is just a panic on the part of the government. And people aren't dumb. They can see it. So if there's a better option for them, they're going to take that. Now, the question is, will the Argentinian government try to make it illegal to buy Bitcoin somehow or to use Bitcoin?
Invariably, yes, is the answer to that. I mean, it's not like it's not like this is the first time we're seeing this movie, right? I mean, like this has all happened before in Argentina by itself, but in South America and in parts of Africa, this is a fairly common way that things go. I think the better question is, can Bitcoin help to break this cycle? Because the only way that you can get away with doing things like this is if there is no other option. So now if Bitcoin is an option and it's available to everybody, regardless of what your local government wants you to do, does that mean local governments can no longer pull off maneuvers like this?
I hope so. I mean, that would really go a long way toward making the world better for ordinary people.
We're going to find out soon enough, because even if they try to ban Bitcoin, this is an environment where the rule of law is weak, as it is in most countries where you have these kind of extreme measures. And what that means is that there's just enough corruption within the political class that even if something like that is illegal, the people with money can bribe people to turn a blind eye to their use of Bitcoin. And what that will do is it will create the conditions necessary for capital flight into Bitcoin. And when capital flight does not involve a flight, when it doesn't involve a suitcase full of money crossing the border, when it involves simply the installation of an application, the balance of power between people and currency and between people and nation states has shifted forever in the favor of people.
But is it really that easy? Like, if you live in Argentina, how do you buy Bitcoins?
That's the beautiful part about it, which is that what you need there is a compensating flow that balances things out. And that compensating flow is essentially remittances. So what you do is you balance remittances coming in from people outside Argentina who are sending money home. And instead of sending US dollars and converting it into Argentinian pesos, they'll send Bitcoin. And then you need local people willing to buy Bitcoin. So you balance remittances from abroad with capital flight from inside the country. And the nice thing is you need to balance it perhaps on 1,000-to-1 ratio. One rich person within doing flight against 1,000 migrants sending money home. And immediately you have a well-balanced flow. I don't think it will be difficult to find buyers within Argentina. And I don't think it will be difficult to find Bitcoin sellers within Argentina if you kick in the remittances flow.
But I mean, the free market really does solve this problem pretty elegantly, right? I mean, there are few exchanges operating in South America right now. And there are multiple countries that have currency controls in South America. And so what you'll see is that if you find these national exchanges, they tend to have very, very high fees. And they also tend to do kind of small volume, but the volume over time is growing. So those companies being out there are like beacons to other companies that say, man, they're making 15% on their transaction fees. That's crazy. We can do that for 10% and make a huge profit. So, I mean, again, like this problem does solve itself over time. The question is, are we allowed to solve the problem, or are the solutions de facto black market solutions because it's illegal to trade in the currency?
When the currency is in this condition, the only market is the black market. And that's the important thing to realize. That what to us seems alien and extreme and only under the worst possible circumstances and frowned upon by law in many other countries is the norm. The black market is much more powerful in countries like Argentina. So think about people who have already moved their money outside of Argentina, yet still need to, I don't know, buy apartments, buy cars, live in Argentina, spend money in Argentina, mostly rich people. But hey, they've already done the hard work of airlifting their currency out, and they can use Bitcoin to bring it back in. I was reading a while ago that some people were buying stock on the Argentinian stock market with pesos that is also listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and then selling the stock in New York for dollars, and essentially using the stock market to do currency arbitrage and move money out of the country. So any single avenue, any door left open is so attractive to people trapped in a sinking currency that they will go to extreme lengths and measures in order to exit the sinking currency. And they'll be willing to deal with uncertainty, with risk, with exchange rate risk, with legal risk, with bribing, with whatever they need to do to save whatever value they have in their meager savings. People are willing to do a lot more work to adopt Bitcoin in a country like that than they are to adopt Bitcoin in a country like the US. And I think that's the main lesson of Bitcoin. It's all about the other 6 billion.
You know, I just looked on localbitcoins.es, which is the Spanish local Bitcoins, Spanish language version. And I looked at the Counterarguments in Argentina. And in Buenos Aires, there's several listings, for local sale, both for Argentinian pesos and for US dollars. So it looks like this is already starting. And what are we going to see happening next? I don't know because, well, actually, this is pretty good. So somebody is selling Bitcoins for $9.95 US dollars, which is below market rate. That's like BTCE rates right now, currently. And, somebody's selling for 1,113 US dollars. And some of these people have a lot of feedback. So it looks like they've been getting some sales.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be a rapidly growing market over the next couple of months, and specifically, the next couple of years. I just talked with a guy who started up a podcast in Portuguese, and I believe it's the first Bitcoin podcast in the Portuguese language. And so again, I think that really just all of the non-English language areas are a little bit behind the Western world in terms of where we are thinking about Bitcoin, but they're not far behind, and they're catching up really fast.
And the motivation are clearly aligned in a much stronger way than they are here. And so I predict that 2014 will be the year of Bitcoin in the periphery, if you like. It's not going to be in the developed world. It's going to be playing out massively as a tsunami of capital flight in the developing world. And that's where we're going to see most action in Bitcoin. The center of gravity has shifted. The hotspots are going to be Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. That's really exciting, I think, for Bitcoin. It opens a whole new level of possibility. Even for those of us who are here in the US, it means great things, as we've seen with the price increase because of China.
I'm working on CoinPunk, and we're in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and this is the Allentown, Pennsylvania subway that accepted Bitcoin. And we are going to demonstrate for the first time ever a pure website-based QR code scanning Bitcoin wallet. So CoinPunk actually can do a QR code scan now without even having a native application installed. And I think this is the first time that anyone has ever done a QR code based point of sale transaction with Bitcoin with just a web browser and no native applications installed. Apple's been banning Bitcoin applications, so it's kind of a huge problem in the community. So we're going to solve that problem right now.
So Black Friday, we get a 20% discount.
Oh, you guys are having a discount for Black Friday?
Bitcoin.
That's awesome. That's good.
$5.
Cool. So this is just a web browser, so you can click that, and then it pops up, and you just take the photo of the QR code. So this is how it's going to work.
Yep. So I just inputted that in.
Yeah.
And there's the QR code.
So Apple actually banned this app you're using?
Yeah, the Coinbase.
Yeah, Coinbase app. Apple actually removed this from their store, so you can't even reinstall it right now if you remove it. That's why I did this. Yeah, so it's a web app, so I'm just going to click that, and then it pops up the take photo thing.
Oh, wow.
And then you just take a photo.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So here we go. This is the QR code, and we're going to hit the... anyway. All right, here it goes. It worked?
Yeah, it worked.
It worked.
Yay.
That's awesome. Thank you. So, you get a cookie?
Yeah, you get a cookie.
Thank you so much.
When you shop with Bitcoin on Gift, you can get gift cards from over 200 retailers. Think of the possibilities. Not only is your holiday shopping taken care of in a snap from your Android device or on the web, but now you have a way to purchase everyday items from stores like Target, CVS, Gap, and GameStop using your Bitcoins. That's not even the best part. When you shop with Bitcoin on Gift, you get 3% back. Ready to shop? Visit GYFT.com today.
Happy holidays from Let's Talk Bitcoin. If you like the work we're doing, we appreciate Bitcoin tips of all sizes at letstalkbitcoin.com. Just as importantly, share the show with your peers and review the show on iTunes. Don't be kind, be honest. LTV reaches nearly 10,000 listeners, but has less than 50 reviews anywhere I can find. I'd very much appreciate your help in remedying this situation. Thanks for listening.
Hi everyone, Andreas Antonopoulos here. I'm in Buenos Aires, Argentina, getting ready for the Latin America Bitcoin Conference. As part of my visit here, I'm meeting much of the Bitcoin community, but I have a special guest, someone who's been very influential in exploring the other layers of protocols that can be installed on top of Bitcoin, the types of applications that come after currency. So my guest here today is Manuel, who is the founder and chief developer for Proof of Existence, proofofexistence.com. And Proof of Existence is a notarization service that allows you to digitally sign data and prove their existence. So, Manuel, tell me a bit about how you got involved with Bitcoin.
Well, I heard about it in 2010, 3 months before the crash, the first $30 crash,
yes,
if I'm correct. At first, I was interested in the technology aspect. I was studying at the university, distributed systems and cryptography course, and I was just learning that the distributed timestamping problem was impossible to solve. And the next day, I read about Bitcoin and how they solved it, and they created an economic system which is decentralized. So I was really impressed by that. At first, I started mining a little bit with my GPU, which at that time was enough to mine. And after that, I started investing some money, some savings. In 2013, I started to get involved in the development aspect. I started to read code from other projects, and I decided I wanted to try and develop something myself. So that's when I created Proof of Existence. At first, the idea for Proof of Existence came first unlinked to Bitcoin. I wanted to make a web service where you could certify a document in a centralized way. That meant that people had to trust my servers and my authority to certify the document. But as I was reading about Bitcoin every day, and suddenly the connection came to me, and I said, why don't we certify this document with the blockchain, which requires no trust? And so I thought that would be difficult, like the technical aspect would be difficult, but it proved really simple. I discovered like that the programming aspect for Bitcoin is really, really simple.
Yes.
And so I created the whole site in less than a week in my spare time. And that's that. I created it as a technical experiment, and well, it got some good reception at first, but over the last 2 weeks, someone posted it on Hacker News, and it went somewhat viral on Twitter. So
yes,
it's now grown a lot more, and many people are becoming interested in it.
So let's just quickly describe what Proof of Existence is. So the problem you're solving is the problem of attestation, digital attestation or digital notarization. So in a traditional sense, if you want to prove that someone has a document like a deed to a house or a stock certificate, or has created a new idea, for example, like a patent or a copyright, and they want to prove that this idea existed at a specific point in time. Today, the way you do that is you go to a public notary in most countries, and they will basically sign and stamp on that piece of paper and put it in a public register, which is, like a paper version of a blockchain, but it's distributed. So if somebody wanted to confirm that, they would have to go back to that notary and get a letter that proves that in the register they had your information. So you solved this by essentially fingerprinting or getting a hash of any document. You can put any data stream in this?
Yeah, any digital file.
Any digital file, and you create a fingerprint. What type of fingerprint is that? How many bits?
It's SHA-256.
SHA-256. Okay, so you've basically got a 256-bit signature. And then how do you insert that into the blockchain?
I had read, I didn't invent the technique myself. I had read that other people had embedded data in the blockchain, so I started to research on that. And there's two main methods, or at least at that time, the most common methods were, one was the data fragment for new mined blocks, which the miners control.
So this is the coin base that goes into the first transaction.
So that was out of my reach because I was not a big miner at the moment. So the other method is to embed the data inside a Bitcoin address and send the transaction to that address, so that this transaction gets stored in the distributed ledger for Bitcoin, which is a blockchain, and in that way you have a distributed means of storing that data. So the basic idea is you replace the public key associated with the Bitcoin address with arbitrary data, which in fact renders the address useless because
there is no private key corresponding to it.
Exactly.
So this is what in Bitcoin speak is an unspendable output, a transaction that you send money to, and that money disappears because it cannot be redeemed as an input into another transaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Or more bluntly speaking, people call this dust, because theoretically the purpose of the blockchain is to transfer value, not data.
Yeah.
Right. So I bristle when I hear that description, because to me Bitcoin is a protocol and currency is just the first application, and I'm really excited to see other applications. The basic problem that you described that Satoshi solves, which is achieving distributed consensus without trusted third party, has so many more applications than currency. And there's no reason to bootstrap a new blockchain every time you want to build a new application. It's much easier to have the security of 5 petahashes of mining behind you.
Yeah.
So did you get that kind of criticism? Did people tell you what you're doing is a waste of time, it's dust, it's you using the blockchain wrong?
Yeah, I still get a lot of emails saying stop spamming the blockchain, even from the Bitcoin core developers, not personal emails, but when people discuss the service on the forums, their general reaction, they don't seem to like it.
We're talking about a tiny amount of data here, right? So SHA-256 is 40 bytes of data?
Yeah.
And so...
No, it's 32, I think.
32. So it's a tiny amount of data. So you're basically using up
two addresses,
2 outputs. Do you do that in a single transaction or 2 transactions?
Single transaction.
Single transaction, 1 input, 2 outputs.
Yes.
And you actually spend some Bitcoin doing this?
Yeah.
What's the minimum amount you spend for one of these?
I'm not sure because I changed it, but I think it's a Satoshi, or just above the dust threshold.
Oh, 5,432 Satoshis, right, yeah. Or something like that, I'm guessing the number. Right, so it uses a small amount of Bitcoin. This Bitcoin is forever lost, and certainly that's an argument for not doing it exactly this way. Now, you mentioned to me recently that there are better ways of doing it now.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a bit about those?
Yeah. Many people have suggested better ways to store data in the blockchain. Using this method, the clients, they can prune these transactions because they don't need to store these outputs in the UTXO, which is the unspent transaction outputs, which is a pretty scarce resource for the network.
When transactions are put into the blockchain, each transaction creates an output that in the future could potentially be used as an input in a future transaction. It can be spent. And so each client, in order to be able to figure out what can be spent to create transactions. It has to keep a database in memory, usually, of all of the outputs that are in the blockchain currently that have not yet been spent. That includes all of the money that Satoshi mines, a ton of dust from various other services that create unspendable outputs. So the key issue here is not whether it's unspendable, but whether it's provably unspendable, because if you don't know if it's unspendable, you have to keep it around forever. But if you can prove that it's unspendable, then you can just discard it. The only purpose of it is for archival purposes, right? So it can stay on the blockchain. So op return is an operand inside the transaction scripting language. So for our audience, within each transaction, even the simple transfer of value for, say, Alice pays Bob for a cup of coffee is actually a tiny script in a Forth-like language that is evaluated by a state machine. And that allows the Satoshi client and all Bitcoin clients to be very flexible in the types of transactions they can process. And up to now, with your solution and on all the other solutions for embedding data, you had to kind of abuse that system. You had to use it in a way that it wasn't intended. But with op return, you can simply say this is a data value that has no spendable use, so you can then prune it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So this is a major development, essentially op return, which was a very deliberate move, I think, to create this capability. This makes it possible for all kinds of other protocols to be embedded on top. I've described it as similar to port 80, where you can then shove a ton of other protocols through it, like with HTTP. Would you agree? Can you see possibilities for future protocols?
Yeah, in fact, there's quite a few projects already working on adding a new protocol layer over Bitcoin. For example, the Mastercoin project is... I've actually contributed some code in that project in this first month, and we had the same problem, wanting to embed data in the blockchain, and some people didn't like it, so this was one of the reactions from the development team. Okay, people are going to use the blockchain for other uses other than a monetary system, so let's support that from the protocol in a way that it doesn't hurt the monetary system.
A more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
Now, this still creates a bigger blockchain, but that wasn't the main problem, because the blockchain isn't growing very fast when you're adding 32 bytes. The problem was the memory footprint of the UTXO, because you can never get rid of that. You can never summarize it. You can never prove it. So with proof of existence, the main use is obviously to prove a piece of data existed at a specific piece of time. I know I've used it for the Safe Paper Wallet project, and one of the main uses for me was to do code signing, so that people could verify that the code they were downloading from Safe Paper Wallet was secure and was the exact same code I had uploaded. Because the big danger is that a hacker could come in, replace it with a code that has, for example, a compromised random number generator, and suddenly their paper wallets are no longer secure. Now, traditionally, websites would do this by having the downloadable file and the MD5 or SHA on the same page. And that doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because if you're a hacker and you have to replace the file, you can replace the SHA too. I know some people had previously suggested, let's go back in Google Cache or Wayback Machine and confirm it was like that before. But with this, you've got 5 petahashes of mining power guaranteeing it. So for code signing, proof of existence is absolutely amazing. I can think of a couple of other immediate applications, patents being one of them, trademark applications for proof of use, and perhaps copyright if you're writing something that you want to prove existence. But I can imagine there are a lot of others. What strange applications or interesting applications have you seen of your service?
Well, I was contacted this week, actually, by an Australian guy who told me he had uploaded his whole genome, his DNA.
Wow. Okay.
Not uploaded, sorry. He uploaded the hash to the blockchain. So essentially he proved he himself existed at a certain time in a fully anonymous and distributed way.
That is fascinating. So DNA fragment, fingerprinted, and then embedded in the blockchain, proving that this person existed at this particular moment in time. That is truly an incredible application, and certainly not one that Satoshi would have imagined necessarily, although it is exactly the kind of thing that a distributed ledger of asset tracking with consensus validation is perfect for.
Yeah.
I have no idea how he would use this or what value it would have, but it's definitely very interesting.
Yeah.
What other applications have you seen? Anything else like that?
Yeah, there's also the idea to certify communications between parties which are involved in any sort of agreement. So you can prove that the other party didn't answer, because if you both agree that you're going to upload any communication and certify it with the blockchain, and then you can prove that certain communication stopped at a given moment in time.
So you can do it like registered mail, perhaps, or service of process, where you want to serve legal papers to someone and prove that you sent it by connecting it to the blockchain. That is fascinating. These are all examples of the basic science that Satoshi solved, which for lay people, the idea is that if you have two parties trying to communicate across an insecure medium, or two or more parties, them being able to achieve consensus when other people can intercept, delete, or corrupt their messages. That problem is called the Byzantine generals problem. It's a problem that was first described in 1975, I believe, by a distributed computing scientist. And when Satoshi first published his paper, the immediate response was, well, that could never work, because that would be a solution to the Byzantine generals problem. Turns out it's working. Right? We don't know if it's the perfect solution, but it is certainly an optimized solution, and seems to be working. So thank you very much, both for talking to us, but also for developing the kinds of applications that really show the future of Bitcoin, the protocol, above and beyond Bitcoin, the currency. And I hope to hear more during this conference. So Manuel Arauz, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Andres. It was really nice to meet you in person.
Thank you.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB.
Hi, this is Jason King for Bitcoin 100, and you're listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. But you know, Bitcoin is not really a talker. It's a doer, just like the best nonprofits and charity organizations. And at Bitcoin100.org, all we do is find hardworking nonprofits and charities and give them $1,000 in Bitcoin. That's all we do. So donate to Bitcoin 100 and let Bitcoin, nonprofits, and charities do what they do best.
I can talk about Y Combinator, I guess. I guess you guys all know about that. Let me introduce myself briefly while things are loading here. So my name is Balaji Srinivasan. There's actually 12 people with my same first and last name in the Bay Area alone. In fact, I randomly ran into another one of them at Stanford and founded a genomics company with them. I go by my full initials, BSS, and I am a Stanford lifer. I got my BS-MS PhD at Stanford, and in 2006, I started teaching computer science and statistics there. I left Stanford in early 2008, scandalizing the department to found a genomics company, which has become very successful. Our name is Council, and we test about 3% of all birds in the United States. I've also taught a MOOC at startup.stanford.edu, which has become quite successful. But I'm going to talk about something fairly different today. So, can we go? Yes? Works? Okay. So, what we're going to talk about today is something I'm calling Silicon Valley's ultimate exit. And so, as motivation here, it's a bit topical, is the USA the Microsoft of nations? We can take this sort of thing and we can expand it. Code base is 230 years old, written in an obfuscated language. System was shut down for 2 weeks straight. Systematic FUD on security issues. Fairly ruthless treatment of key suppliers.
Generally favors its rich enterprise customers, but we still have to buy it. And, if we think about Microsoft itself, there's a great quote from Bill Gates in 1998. What displaced Microsoft? What did he fear? It wasn't Oracle or anybody like that. What he feared were some guys in a garage who happened to be, ultimately, we found it was Larry and Sergey back in 1998. And the thing about what Larry and Sergey did is there's no way that they could have reformed Microsoft from the inside. At that time, Microsoft already had 26,000 employees. Joining as numbers 26,000, 26,001, and then trying to push for 20% time or free lunches, they probably wouldn't have gone too far. So what they had to do was start their own company. They had to exit. And with success in that alternative, then Microsoft would imitate them. And this is actually related to a fundamental concept in political science, the concept of voice versus exit. If a company or a country is in decline, you can try voice or you can try exit. Voice is basically changing the system from within, whereas exit is leaving to create a new system, a new startup, or to join a competitor sometimes. Loyalty can modulate this. Sometimes that's patriotism, which is voluntary, and sometimes it's lock-in, which are involuntary barriers to exit. And we can think about this in the context of various examples and start to get a feel for this. So, voice in the context of open source would be a patch, exit would be a fork. Voice in the context of a customer would be a complaint form, whereas exit would be taking your business elsewhere. Voice in the context of a company, that's a turnaround plan. Exit is leaving to found a startup. And voice in the context of a country is voting, while exit is emigration. So up there are those two images. On the left is the normal Rockwell painting on voice. On the right is actually my dad in the center, and that's kind of a grass hut on the right-hand side. So he grew up on a dirt floor in India and left because India was an economic basket case, and there's no way that he could have voted to change things within his lifetime, so he left. And it turns out that while we talk a lot about voice in the context of the U.S. and talk about democracy, that's very important, but we're not just a nation of immigrants, we're a nation of immigrants. We're shaped by both voice and exit. Starting with the Puritans, they fled religious persecution. The American revolutionaries, which, left England's orbit. Then we started moving west, leaving the East Coast bureaucracy to go to the Western nations. Later, late 1800s, Ellis Island, people leaving pogroms, and in the 20th century, fleeing Nazism and communism. And sometimes people didn't just come here for a better life, they came here to save their life. That's the airlift at the end of Saigon. And it's not just the US that's shaped by exit. Silicon Valley itself is also shaped by exit. You can date it back to the founding of Fairchild Semiconductor with the Traitorous Eight and the founding of Fairchild. The fact that non-competes are not enforceable in California. The fact that VC funds disruption, not just turnaround. The concept of forking in open source, if you think about the back button, that is in some ways one of the cheapest ways to exit something. And of course, the concept of a startup itself. That right there, if you guys haven't seen, is one of Y Combinator's first ads. Larry and Sergey won't respect you in the morning. So the concept here is that exit is actually an extremely important force in complement to voice, and it's something which is something that gives voice its strength. So in particular, it protects minority rights. In the upper left corner, for example, you can imagine two countries, and country one is following policy A, and country two following policy B. Some minority, is potentially interested in following policy B, but A is very stridently, promulgated by the majority. However, there's some other country, maybe a smaller country, maybe another country that's actually quite into B, and so that person leaves. And they're not necessarily super into B, but they think it might be interesting, thus B question mark. And what happens is that all the other guys in A see that people are actually leaving. They really care about this particular policy so much that they actually left. It could be a feature where people are leaving for a competitor. It could be a bug that you haven't fixed, so people fork the project and take it somewhere else. But what happens is exit amplifies voice, right? So it's a crucial additional feature for democracy is to reduce the barrier to exit, to make democratic voice more powerful, more successful. And so a voice gains much more attention when people are leaving in droves. And, if I would bet that exit is a reason why half this audience is alive. Many of us have our ancestors who came from, China, Vietnam, Korea, Iran, places where there's war or famine, economic basket cases. Exit is something that I believe we need to preserve, and exit is what this talk is about. So exit is really a meta concept. It's about alternatives. It's a meta concept that subsumes competition, forking, founding, and physical immigration. It means giving people the tools to reduce influence of bad policies over their lives without getting involved in politics, the tools to peacefully opt out. And if you combine those three things, this concept of the US as a Microsoft of nations, the quote from Gates and Hirschman's treatise, you get this concept of Silicon Valley's ultimate exit. Basically, I believe that the ability to reduce the importance of decisions made in DC in particular, without lobbying or sloganeering, it's actually going to become extremely important over the next 10 years. And you might ask, why? What does this have to do with anything? So the reason why is that today it's Silicon Valley versus what I call the paper belt. So there's 4 cities that used to run the United States in the post-war era, okay? Boston with higher ed, New York City with Madison Avenue, books, Wall Street, newspapers, Los Angeles with movies, music, Hollywood, and of course DC with laws and regulations formally running the country. And so I called them the paper belt after the Rust Belt of yore. And in the last 20 years, a new competitor to the paper belt arose out of nowhere, Silicon Valley. And by accident, we're putting a horse head in all of their beds. Right? We are becoming stronger than all of them combined. And to get a sense of this, Silicon Valley is reinventing every industry in these cities. That X up there is supposed to be a screenplay for, the paper of LA. And LA is going to iTunes, BitTorrent, Netflix, Spotify, YouTube. That was really the first on the hit list, starting in '99 with Napster. New York, right alongside AdWords, Twitter, Blogger, Facebook, Kindle, Aereo. We're going after newspapers. We're going after Madison Avenue. We're going after book publishing. We're going after television. Aereo figured out how to put a solid-state antenna in a server farm so they don't have to pay any TV fees for over there recording. Recently, Boston was next in the gun sites. Khan Academy, Coursera, Udacity. And most interestingly, DC. And by DC, I'm using it as a metonym for just, government regulation in general, because it's not just DC, it includes local and state governments. Uber, Airbnb, Stripe, Square, and of course, the big one, Bitcoin, are all things that threaten DC's power. It is not necessarily clear that the US government can ban something that it wants to ban anymore. And so, because of this, it's something I call the paper jam. The backlash is beginning, okay? More jobs predicted for machines, not people. Job automation is a future unemployment crisis looming. Imprisoned by innovation as, tech wealth explodes, Silicon Valley, poverty spikes. They are basically going to try to blame the economy on Silicon Valley. To say that it was the iPhone and Google that done did it, not the bailouts, the bankruptcies, and the bombings. And, this is something which we need to identify as false, and we need to actively repudiate. So we must respond via voice. The obvious counterargument is that the Valley reduces prices. In the top, it's a little small, but that's a famous graph, consumption spreads faster today, that shows the absolutely exponential rise of technologies over the last century. Anything that is initially just the province of the 1%, whether it be computers or cell phones, quickly becomes the province of the 5% and the 10%. That MVP that barely works, that someone is willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for, allows you to fix the bugs, to get economies of scale, to bring it to the 10%, and then 20%, and then the 50%, the middle class, and then the 99%. That's how we got cell phones from, a toy for Wall Street to something that's helping the poorest of the poor all over the world. Technology is about reducing prices. The bottom curve there is Moore's law. And by contrast, the paper belt raises them. There's the tuition bubble and the mortgage bubble and the medical care bubble and too many bubbles to name. And so the argument that the Valley is a problem is incoherent, but it's not going to be sufficient to respond via voice. We can make this argument, but the ultimate counter-argument is actually exit. And not necessarily physical exit, but exit in a variety of different forms. What they're basically saying is, rule by DC means people are going back to work. And the emerging meme is that rule by us is rule by Terminators, who are going to take all the jobs. Whereas we can say, and we can argue, DC's rule is more like, a ruined building in Detroit. And down right there is actually like a Google data center, right? And so we can go back and forth verbally, but ultimately this is about counterfactuals. They have aircraft carriers. We don't actually want to fight them. It wouldn't be smart. So we want to show what a society run by Silicon Valley would look like without actually affecting anyone who still really believes the paper belt is actually good. And that's where exit comes in. So what do I mean by this? What do I mean by Silicon Valley's ultimate exit? It basically means build an opt-in society, ultimately outside the US, run by technology. And this is actually where the Valley is going. This is where we're going over the next 10 years. That's where mobile is going. It's not about a location-based app. It's about making location completely irrelevant. So Larry Page, for example, wants to set aside a part of the world for unregulated experimentation. That's carefully phrased. He's not saying, take away the laws in the US. If you like your country, you can keep it. Same with Mark Andreessen, right? The world is going to see an explosion of countries in the years ahead, double, triple, quadruple countries, right? Since the end of the Cold War, we've just been seeing them, burst up in all kinds of places. And some of the best will have lessons for all the rest. Singapore's healthcare system is an example to the rest of the world. Estonia actually has, digital parking meters and all kinds of things. We can copy those things without necessarily taking the risk. Let them take the risk, and then we can copy them. It amplifies voice. So, importantly, you don't have to fight a war to start a new company, okay? You don't have to, kill the former CEO in a duel. So a very important meta concept is to create peaceful ways to exit and start new countries. So, two of the founders of, PayPal, Peter Thiel is into seasteading. Elon Musk wants to build a Mars colony. And you can scale it back too, even on Hacker News just recently within the realm of someone on startup number 1 versus startup number 2, these guys just went and bought a private island. Just random. It's, in the middle of Canada. It's freezing cold. There's sticks over there. It doesn't exactly look like Oahu. But the best part is this. The people who think this is weird, the people who sneer at the frontier, right, who hate technology, they won't follow you out there. Okay? That's the thing about, exit. Is you can take as much or a little of it as you want. You don't have to actually go and get your own island. You can do the equivalent of dual booting or telecommuting. You can opt out to whatever level that you prefer, right? Simply, going on to Reddit rather than, watching television is a way of opting out. There is this entire digital world up here, which we can jack our brains into and we can opt out. The paper belt may stop us from leaving. And that's actually what I think of as one of the most important things over the next 10 years is to use technology, especially mobile, to reduce the barriers to exit. With it, we can build a world run by software. Here's some examples. 3D printing will turn regulation into DRM. It'll be impossible to ban physical objects, from medical devices to drones to cars. You can 3D print all these things, and there are entire 3-letter regulatory agencies that are just devoted to banning goods. With Bitcoin, capital controls become packet filtering. It's impossible to do bail-ins if everyone's on Bitcoin, to seize money as they did in Cyprus or in Poland. With quantified self, medicine is going to become mobile. You're going to be able to measure yourself. With telepresence, your immigration policy is going to turn into your firewall. Double robotics is just the start. Any bots, these robots that you can control remotely, moving them around like a Doom video game. Soon they'll be humanoid on their side, and they're going to get pretty good. So you can be anywhere in the world walking around with a humanoid robot on their side, and without paying a plane ticket. Drones, warfare is going to become software. Law is going to become code. Management via robotics is going to become automation, and property rights are going to become a network effect. If you know about Bitcoin smart property. So technological details. These are topics for the next MOOC. You can sign up at coursera.org/course startup. It'll be better the third time around. But that's what I think, if you want to think big, if you want to think about things that are next, build technologies as minimal or as maximal as you want for what the next society looks like. It could be something as simple as allowing people, the middle class to make tax shelters, apps that allow people to travel and relocate better because it's a huge pain to move from city to city. Anything you can think of that reduces the barrier to exit, that reduces lock-in. If we work together, we might be able to build something like this. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to episode 65 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. 35% is Nothing to Sneeze At was produced and edited by Adam B. Levine, featured Stephanie Murphy, Andreas Antonopoulos, and Adam B. Levine. CoinPunk First was presented courtesy of Kyle Drake with editing for content by Adam B. Levine. Proof of Existence was produced by Andreas M. Antonopoulos, edited by Adam B. Levine, and featured Andreas M. Antonopoulos and Manuel Aros. Silicon Valley's Ultimate Exit was played courtesy of Y Combinator Talks. Music was provided by Jared Rubens. Questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Have a good one.